Welcome to Talk of the Bay. I'm Christine Barrington. For most of us, the magic of a library starts young, becoming a special mecca of our youth. Amidst the stacks, you explored the world, and in so doing, discovered yourself. And that magic continues throughout our lives. The public library is a vital structural core to its community, and each library tells the tale of who its locals are. And so tonight, we are going to tell the story about one very special library, and it starts like this. Once upon a time, there were state funding shortages, which would have cost a lovely seaside town called Carmel their local library. In that dire moment, community members stepped up to create the Carmel Public Library Foundation, and today, Carmel locals fund an award-winning library system that benefits the entire region. And here to tell us all about this exciting story is Alexandra Fallon, Executive Director of the Carmel Library Foundation. Alexandra, are you here with us?
I am. Thank you so much, Christine. That was a great story. I love that story.
Yes, and you're going to help us fill it out in some details. And, so the mission of the Carmel Public Library Foundation is to keep the library open, relevant, and thriving. And it does that by providing 100% of the books, materials, programs, equipment, and services that the library offers. That's from your mission statement. I think it's amazing. So could you tell us a little bit more by starting with the history of the foundation and how it started?
Well, exactly as you mentioned, Christine, there was a lack of state funding. And so the foundation came in a public-private partnership with the city of Carmel in order to keep our library open. And so we are really in this like trifecta, if you will. We have a relationship with the city of Carmel by the Sea, and they provide the funding for the librarian salaries and building maintenance. And then there's a library board of trustees, which is like the oversight and governance of the library itself. And the foundation is it's a separate 501c3 whose mission, as you said, is to keep our library open, relevant, and thriving by funding pretty much everything else, everything that's not a librarian or the building maintenance, and all of the equipment programs, services. Everything else is funded by our community, which speaks volumes about Carmel and also people around the peninsula who also fund the library.
Yes, because I noticed on your website that you emphasize that it really serves residents of the Central Coast. So clearly the mission is wider than Carmel, and I'm sure we're going to get into that because, I know if I lived in the region, but not necessarily in Carmel, I would certainly make an effort to go visit the library and take advantage of the amazing programs that the foundation helps create. So let's just start at the top and let listeners know about some of these amazing programs that get offered and what the foundation has done. All right.
Absolutely. I will start by saying, because you touched on sort of the broad, the bandwidth of the library itself, and we do really phenomenal summer reading programs, both for kids and adults. And so we see a lot of people coming from Pacific Grove, from Monterey and Big Sur, from all over the region to these programs. It's a really carefully curated program that's full of fun, very interactive, and the kids love it. And we have upwards of 100 kids, and like during the course of just one program throughout the summer. And this happens like once a week throughout the summer. And then throughout the year, there's all kinds of programs for kids, like baby yoga and Friday night family night movies, and there's so throughout the year this is happening. And then sort of as like an underpinning, the foundation has programs, let's say almost every once a month, and it's an eclectic array of programs that include fiction and nonfiction. There could be things on travel. This past year, we had Douglas Brinkley, the historian, talk about his latest book. We had a Kurdish local writer, Bahoma, talk about her. She was the first author to produce a fiction in her language. And so it's very eclectic. and it really helps bring in new speakers and sort of elevate the collective consciousness of our entire community with these types of programs.
I noticed that on your website that you have like a lecture series, and we're going to talk about that. Like you just touched on it. You bring in these like really high level authors, but then you film those presentations and those stay up in perpetuity. So anyone can go in and just have a deep dive into all kinds of subjects by just tapping into that video library. And
absolutely.
And that's expensive to do, right? I mean, it's, to have that resource is amazing.
It is, and we actually, like most nonprofits and most businesses, pivoted to doing a lot more online and virtual programming. And what we found was afterwards, people, especially this demographic, and it gets dark and cold a little bit earlier in the year than some other places south of us, and so we decided to see if we could keep those programs going. And you're right, the additional funding that we have for those makes it so that everyone has access to the programs and information. It's great.
And as you were talking, I'm settling into this story, you were sharing with these summer reading programs. When do those start? Because we're like kind of a month into summer, right?
Yeah, they're on right now. So we're in the middle of that. They start sort of the end of June, and then they go to towards the end of July. And we have people, it's so sweet because there are a lot of grandparents coming in with their kids, with their grandchildren for this. And it's really a family endeavor. And it's really lovely to see all of these kids and their parents come together to participate in this. I mean, I know when my kids were part of this program, they had like reptiles. There was someone who came in and did like a bubble show and all kinds of interactive. It just made it exciting for the children and for the parents.
Well, I'm having this fantasy of maybe next year in May bringing in the librarians who curate that reading program, because it's really exciting to hear like how books get chosen and why and what adventures people will be going on, through a program like that.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because this year, as we look forward to our programs, I was thinking about typically we don't have a theme. It's very eclectic, and we mix it with, like I said, nonfiction and fiction. But this past year, Carmel's gone through a 20-year guideline review of its design, and then the library received some funding, a small amount from the city, to do an assessment of the buildings as like a master plan. And so this year, I'm doing programs that touch on design and design thinking even, and we even have a program about learning about your individual carbon footprint, which I think is going to be absolutely fascinating. So stay tuned.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And, as you describe these programs and people coming in, grandparents, children, individuals interested in learning about their carbon footprint, I'm really seeing how vital libraries are. They're sort of this nodal point of weaving a community structure, and it's pretty critical, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It is so critical. I mean, and I think we saw this particularly during the shutdown, and the library never stopped operating, but the buildings, of course, the physical spaces were closed during COVID. And yet, people were still craving to come together, whether it was on Zoom or not, or to bring, their children to get their books. And as we were able to emerge and slowly reopen the physical spaces, now the library once a month is doing a music in the library program, which was fantastic. And people from all ages came, and there was some wonderful Irish folk music and all kinds of things. And then actually right before we had to close the buildings, we had embarked upon a project called The Gathering Place. And it is the first free meeting space in Carmel that we were able to open. And it is received so much use right now. You can book a book club. You can host a nonprofit meeting, there's a screen that comes down. You can do a small film screening, student group gatherings, and of course, for the foundation, we hold like most of our meetings there as well. And that has been really a wonderful addition for the community.
And I'm sure there's a whole story like of how that was conceived and planned and executed. And like how long ago did that idea spark in the imagination of the foundation?
Well, actually, I would love to take credit for it, Christine, but it was, I think, I want to say 1957. The library director,
wow.
It was really part of a
That's
community demand.
That's a long time ago.
Yes, it's been a long time in the making. And so it was brought up then, and then it resurfaced as the library conducted some wonderful out-facing community conversations to find out what the community, what else they were looking for from the library. And this space came up again. There's no great place to meet, and where can we have a place where we can reserve it? And it's really easy. You can call up or go online and reserve it. And like I said, it gets a tremendous amount of use, and that was funded by our community, by Carmel Public Library Foundation, and Lacey Buck, who was and is a devotee of the library and the foundation. So it really is thanks to the community that we have this community space.
Yeah, and having a community space is so critical. It's such a leveler, and I bet it's beautiful, right? Like a beautiful, nourishing space. Yeah,
it's beautiful, and what's really neat too is that it's a multi-use space. So the tables can fold, and you can set up chairs there, so that there's an area if people do want to have a lecture, a small lecture, or watch a film. And it's just it's a beautiful space there are Forest Theater original printed posters that are hung up in that space, and as well as Mrs. Harrison's private collection of books, which is really neat also, after the Harrison Memorial Library. So it feels somewhat nostalgic, but also is very functional. It's like a highly functional space. So it makes it, we like form and function,
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got some other special spaces that I want to talk about, but just in case you've just tuned in, you're listening to Talk of the Bay on K-Squid Community Radio for the Central Coast. We are talking with Alexandra Fallon, Executive Director of the Carmel Public Library Foundation, whose funds 100% of the books, materials, programs, equipment, and services to keep the library open and thriving and serving the Carmel community and the area near there. So, Alexandra, you also, I think, this is pretty recent, right? There's a dedicated children's library in a separate building. Isn't that right?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes, a lot of people think that we have just the one library, because it is Carmel Public Library. So we started with the Harrison Memorial Library, which is 95 years old this year, and it's a Maybach architecture building with Murphy at the helm of a lot of the design and so forth, but it is a Maybach-designed building. And the Park Branch came about because there was a need for extra space for children, as well as we house our local history department there, too. There's a local history room. It's called the Henry Mead Local History Room, and that is just 2 blocks away, right behind Devendorf Park, and so it's another wonderful space.
Sweet, and so you also have like a special little teen room, right? That just was developed. That's special for teenagers.
Actually, yeah, that has been around for a little while, and that's located at the Harrison Memorial Library, and that's in the downstairs area. And a lot of kids kind of come together, and it's a great space too for teens.
Sweet. I love it. This just sounds very nourishing and like a gathering in. So I love that name of the gathering place. So you mentioned the Henry Mead Williams history room, right? But there's also a lecture series that's dedicated to local history. Could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. With the development of that space, it made sense to do an accompanying local history lecture series. And every year we do about 2 or 3 of those interspersed with the other programs that we do. Last year we did actually a film screening of Bohemian Soul about the Bohemians of the area, in particular in Carmel. And we did it at the Forest Theater outdoors, and it was fabulous. It was like a pilgrimage, people coming and with their blankets and their food. And then afterwards, after the viewing of the film, we had a wonderful panel discussion with some of the artists, writers, and descendants from some of the people that were featured in the film. So that was just one example of it, and we've had tons of architects featured in the local history lecture series, and we had a talk about Robert Louis Stevenson last year. I mean, we have an endless supply of wonderful, treasured local history figures. So that's always well attended. Yeah.
And so who curates these programs? Like there's also a lecture series that's not the Henry Mead Williams lecture series. There's the Carmel Library Foundation lecture series, right? Do you curate that? Yeah.
So it's also, all of these programs are under the umbrella of the Carmel Public Library Foundation. And so one is, there are 3. One is Community Night with the Library, and those are typically a lecture could run 45 minutes and then some time for Q&A, and that's that format. And then the local history, obviously, we're curating talks about people who have been in arts, culture, literary, mostly, architecture and so forth in the area. And then we started something about 2 years ago called the Fireside Chats at the library. And we just felt like there was a real need for more public, civil, and civic discourse. And so we do a few of those, which are more interactive, and we pick, I think we choose interesting and relevant topics in order to engage the community. And so those are kind of fun, too. So we do about 3 different ones. And then at the end of the year, we do our annual fundraising event to help pay for everything that we're doing. And it's always called the Something Edition. So last year it was the Educated Edition, and we had a wonderful, acclaimed best-selling author, Tara Westover, so like a sold-out Sunset Theater, which was really fabulous. And the year before we had the Futurist Edition with Singapore global strategist and futurist Parag Khanna, which was really interesting. And we've had Thomas Friedman and Douglas Brinkley. Just always trying to find the most compelling and of-the-moment topics that we think our community would like to engage in.
Well, and in case you've just tuned in, you are listening to Alexandra Fallon from the Carmel Public Library Foundation, and we're talking about all the wonderful programs that this foundation makes possible in Carmel. And so, Alexandra, while you were describing all these things, I'm wanting to ask you, what are you excited about? I'm sure you have all kinds of programs that are coming up in the near future. You also have, I'm sure, the theme picked out for the fundraiser at the end of the year. And we've got people probably all hopped up wow, the Carmel Library, I got to head over there. So share with us what you're excited about and looking forward to.
Thank you. Well, as mentioned, like I said, with the master plan, the idea to update, upgrade, reimagine our library spaces is really exciting. And I like to think about, the library is this repository of knowledge, but also during all of these climate change events when we had to evacuate and do these things, the library is also this respite, this place to go, this shelter from the storm, quite literally. And so I'm looking forward to helping the library and the city figure out how to keep the spaces not just relevant for the community for lifelong learning and community connectivity, but also to help with these types of events that we didn't really anticipate maybe a decade ago. The library is always changing, and it's funny because some people, they think, well, what do libraries do that you can't get on Google, or how is it relevant? And it's so interesting to me because librarians, in particular, have always been early adapters, the first ones to adapt and adopt technology, let's say, for example, and then teach the rest of the community how to use it. And so I always look at kind of what we're doing and what libraries are doing and librarians as sort of, setting this trend, so how we can be that gold standard for community connectivity, for a safe haven for people, which we already are in so many ways, but even more so as our world changes. And you were asking me what I'm excited about. I mean, of course, on everyone's mind is AI, and what is that going to mean to us? And I'm looking at it from all different perspectives, and I think that's something that, our community is interested in learning more about. So I really like contemplating things that bubble up in different conversations in my walk of life, whether it's with colleagues or with our patrons, with kids, and find out, what it is. And so that's something that definitely I think is on a lot of people's minds these days.
Oh, yeah. You've just teed me up for one of my hot buttons, which is as the internet gets kind of glutted with information, but it's not easy now to find really high quality information. Like you do a search and it's always these same sites that come up, and then after like a page or two, it's just a bunch of garbage. And my vision is I see librarians with their capes flowing in the wind, and they're going to be our superheroes because they understand information science, and knowledge is power. And I'm just envisioning a lot of us returning to the library and saying, do you have any suggestions for how we sort through this morass of low-quality information? And I think they're going to be there to help us.
Well, that's well put. I mean, we already had, I think it was either last year or the year before, it was about how to disseminate information, right, from whether it's print media or, or online. And you're right. I mean, go to a librarian, they'll give you, like, the best 5, sources, as opposed to, top 5 in an SEO, search. So, yes, they are dependable for, I think, like curated knowledge, and their assistance is, I mean, it's beyond. I use them. I've used them numerous times to get to kind of the heart of what I'm looking for if I'm not quite satisfied with, like you said, the myriad of information that it's online and all over. So they're really helpful, and we're very fortunate to have them as far as people to help with discerning all of this. That's making sense of everything that's online, and
Yeah. And so as we begin to tilt toward the end of this interview, I'm thinking about all these amazing talks and programs that have flowed through the foundation during your tenure. And by the way, how long have you been the executive director at the foundation?
I have been there 6.5 years.
Okay, so in those 6.5 years, do you have a story you could share from one of the talks or an experience you've had at the library that has touched you or changed you in some important way?
Wow, that is a great question. I would say that it happens on a daily. Things I hear from people, how it impacts their lives, and how helpful. I will bring it back to my personal experience that in 1984, the first thing I did when I moved to Carmel was get my library card and a general delivery address because I wasn't sure where I would be living. And to me, I had arrived. And then a few years later, I started a business before the internet started, and librarians helped me hoist the Thomas registers off the shelves to look up, manufacturers, because I had started a skincare business. And then in 2010, I moved back from Los Angeles with my 3 young kids in tow and spent the following 6 years every Saturday with my 3 boys on the floor, in between the aisles, pulling down the books, all the book series and everything. So for me, it's a personally compelling story because I think I'm just, one person who, and there are many like me who have experienced or are beneficiaries of what a library can mean to a person's trajectory, whether it's starting a business or whether it's raising a family or making new friends or feeling part of something greater than themselves. And I can't imagine this town without a vibrant library, and I can't imagine really anyone's life without a library in it to enrich them.
That's wonderful. And as I'm pondering, this is all, donor-led, would you, as we close, would you take a few minutes to perhaps talk about the people who give so much and make this library live through their funding?
Well, yes. I mean, there have been many types of funding and gifts to the library that represent individuals' interest in its existence in perpetuity. And to that end, we have something called the Sterling Circle, where people can include the library in whatever denomination they choose into their estate. And they can see the fruits of their funding while they are with us, or it can be in remembrance of them. But we have received those types of gifts, and then just through various campaigns, we do the Monterey County Gives campaign, we do an annual campaign, and really any amount is appreciated and used to help support all of the library operations that I mentioned that help. And librarians are notorious for being very mindful of every penny spent. So we are really grateful for any amount, and all of this helps. It really takes a village and a whole community to keep this operation going. And so we're just extremely grateful to be in this community that values this type of resource and what the library provides.
Well, let's hear it for, grassroots, crowd-funded solutions that benefit the community and build its resiliency. And it's been such a delight to hear about the Carmel Library Foundation. And so if people are all excited and want to come find you, where do they go?
Well, I'm everywhere. So,
not you personally, but
no, I know. I'm just kidding. I do have an office though at the Kids Library. Should you wish to come in and talk about how you can help support our library, but were you asking? I'm sorry, where you would find our library in terms of
both. I love this. Yes, let's talk about where people can find the library, the foundation, and certainly,
sure.
Yeah.
So the library, we are located behind Devendorf Park. That's the Kids Library on 6th and Mission Street in Carmel, and 2 blocks down on Ocean Avenue. And 7th is the Harrison Memorial Library building. And please come. I mean, both spaces are really vibrant, enjoyable. We have amazing art at the Harrison Memorial Library that you might like to look at as well. And again, that's where the gathering places where you can reserve. And of course, you can find us online, and we're on social media, but you can find us at carmelpubliclibraryfoundation.org. And then also we're staffed in both buildings. So we would love to answer any questions and hopefully see you at the library, at our programs, and around our town.
Well, thank you, Alexandra Fallon, Executive Director of the Carmel Public Library Foundation. It was such a pleasure to hear about these programs, and I hope to see you in Carmel at the library sometime. Thank you for joining us on Talk of the Bay.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you and community radio. Thank you, Christine.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Well, we'll be back for a second half of Talk of the Bay after a short break. Stay with us to hear more about the dynamics driving the challenging public discourse around the Cabrillo College name change process. This is KSQD, Community Radio for the Central Coast.